The massive hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with whispered conversations. Representatives from hundreds of alien species filled the curved seats that rose like stadium bleachers around the central speaking platform. The air recycling system worked overtime to handle the different atmospheric needs of so many different beings. Ambassador Lisa Martinez stood at the human podium, her hands resting calmly on the smooth metal surface. She had given speeches here for 8 years, but today felt different. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Behind her sat the rest of the human delegation. Captain Jake Peterson, commander of the human fleet stationed at Council headquarters, kept his expression neutral despite the heated discussions happening around them. Dr. Helen Foster, Earth's chief science representative, reviewed data on her tablet with quick, nervous movements. The Zalari delegation occupied the prime seats directly across from the humans. Ambassador Thexara, their lead representative, was a tall creature with blue-gray skin and 4 arms. His species had been part of the Council for over 2,000 years, and they never let anyone forget it. The motion is now open for final debate, announced First Speaker Mordain, the elderly Altarian who led the Council sessions. His voice carried clearly through the translation system that let all species understand each other. Thexara rose from his seat, his 4 arms gesturing dramatically. Honored colleagues, we face a critical moment in galactic history. The human species has grown beyond all reasonable limits. Their military fleets patrol our space lanes. Their colonies spread into sectors where they were never invited. Their technology advances at a rate that threatens the careful balance we have maintained for millennia. Lisa watched as heads nodded throughout the chamber. Species that owed their very survival to human intervention were agreeing with the Zalari representative. Resolution 847 is not about limiting humanity out of fear, Thexara continued. It is about preserving the stability that has kept our galaxy peaceful for 3,000 years. The humans must be contained within designated sectors. Their fleet sizes must be capped. All their research must be supervised by Council oversight committees. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Lisa felt a cold weight settling in her stomach. She had seen this coming for months, but part of her had hoped cooler heads would prevail. The Altarian representative stood next. Lisa remembered when the Altarians had begged for human help during the plague that nearly wiped out their species. Human doctors had worked around the clock to find a cure, saving billions of lives. The Zalari speak wisdom, the Altarian said. Humanity's rapid expansion concerns us all. We support Resolution 847. One by one, representatives from various species voiced their support. The Proxima Collective, whose trade ships were protected by human patrols. The Andromedans, who had gained their freedom when human forces broke the chains of the synthetic wars. The Centauri Federation, whose colonies existed only because human terraforming technology had made their worlds livable. Each species that spoke in favor of the resolution owed humanity a debt they could never repay. Yet here they were, voting to restrict the very people who had saved them. Captain Peterson leaned forward and whispered to Lisa, "Ma'am, we're getting reports that Council security forces are moving into position around our embassy and fleet quarters." Lisa nodded slightly but kept her expression calm. She had expected this. The other species were not just planning to restrict humanity. They were preparing to force compliance if humans refused to accept the new limitations. When the debate ended, First Speaker Mordain called for the final vote. The chamber fell silent except for the hum of the translation systems and air recyclers. All those in favor of Resolution 847, please register your vote now. Lisa watched the vote counter on the main display screen. The numbers climbed steadily. Species after species voted to restrict humanity's growth and freedom. All those opposed, please register your vote now. The opposition votes were few. The Terran Wolves, a group of human-allied mercenary clans, voted against the resolution. A handful of smaller species that had maintained good relations with humanity also voted no, but their numbers were pitifully small compared to the tide of yes votes. All those choosing to abstain, please register now. Some species chose not to vote at all, perhaps feeling uncomfortable with the situation but unwilling to oppose the majority. The final tally appeared on the screen. 847 votes in favor, 23 against, 56 abstentions. First Speaker Mordain's voice carried a note of finality. Resolution 847 passes by a significant majority. The restrictions on human expansion and development will take effect in 30 days. Lisa stood slowly and walked to the central platform. The chamber fell silent as she approached the speaking podium. She could feel hundreds of eyes watching her, waiting to see how humanity would respond to this betrayal. Honored representatives, she began, her voice steady and clear. The United Earth Federation has listened to your concerns and your decision. We respect the right of this council to vote as you see fit. A few representatives looked surprised. They had expected anger, threats, or desperate pleas for reconsideration. Lisa reached up and unpinned the ambassador's insignia from her uniform. The small golden pin had been given to her 8 years ago when she first took the position. She had worn it with pride, believing she was part of something greater than any single species. She placed the pin carefully on the podium. The United Earth Federation hereby formally withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. We invoke Article 12 of the Council's founding charter, which guarantees any member species the right to complete diplomatic and military disengagement. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Many species began talking at once, their words mixing into an incomprehensible babble even for the translation systems. Lisa raised her voice to be heard over the noise. You have 90 days to remove all Council installations, personnel, and equipment from human space. Any Council vessels or facilities remaining after that time will be considered abandoned property. She turned and walked back to the human delegation. Captain Peterson and Dr. Foster fell in step behind her as they headed for the exit. Ambassador Martinez, first speaker Mordain called out. Surely we can discuss this. There must be room for negotiation. Lisa stopped at the chamber doors and looked back. You have made your position clear. We respect your decision. Now please respect ours. As the human delegation left the chamber, the representatives behind them sat in stunned silence. They had expected humanity to fight the resolution, to argue against it, maybe even to threaten to leave. But they had not expected such a calm, immediate, and final response. Captain Peterson activated his communication device as they walked down the corridor. All human vessels, this is Captain Peterson. Prepare for immediate departure. We're going home. Within hours, the news spread throughout the galaxy. Humanity was leaving. After 30 years of service, sacrifice, and partnership, they were simply walking away. The species that had voted for their restriction were about to discover just how much they had depended on the humans they had chosen to abandon. 3 months had passed since the vote, and the Vega Science Station hummed with activity. But it was not the usual research work. Instead, humans moved through the corridors with purpose, packing equipment and data cores into shipping containers. Admiral Claire Thompson stood on the station's main observation deck, watching the final transport ships dock with the massive research facility. Her task force of 12 vessels waited in formation nearby, ready to escort the last humans out of Council space. The Vega station had been humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Built in orbit around a neutron star, it had produced breakthrough technologies for 30 years. Faster-than-light communication, advanced medical scanners, quantum computers that could solve problems in minutes that had puzzled scientists for centuries. Admiral, the Zalari delegation is requesting permission to board, reported Commander Ryan Walsh. They want to discuss the research data we're taking with us. Claire did not turn away from the window. Tell them the station will be turned over to Council control as scheduled. What we do with our people's work is not their concern. Dr. Helen Foster approached from behind, carrying a sealed data case. Ma'am, we've completed the download from the main research cores. 30 years of breakthrough discoveries, all backed up and ready for transport. What about the quantum computers? We're taking the 3 newest models with us. The older ones are staying, but... Dr. Foster paused, looking uncomfortable. But what, Doctor? The quantum systems require daily recalibration. The process is extremely complex, and frankly, only humans seem to be able to do it properly. We've tried to train other species over the years, but they could never get the hang of it. Claire smiled grimly. So the Council will inherit quantum computers they cannot operate. That's correct, ma'am. Without human technicians, those systems will be useless within a week. Similar conversations were taking place throughout human space. On mining stations, colonial worlds, and trading posts, humans packed their belongings and prepared to leave. They took their knowledge, their skills, and their innovations with them. The speed of the withdrawal shocked everyone, including some humans. Earth's leadership had spent decades building relationships throughout the galaxy. Trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, scientific partnerships. All of it was being dissolved with clinical efficiency. Captain Jake Peterson supervised the evacuation of the human embassy on the Council homeworld. His security teams moved through the building, ensuring nothing of value remained behind. The embassy had been humanity's diplomatic heart for 30 years. Now it would become an empty building. "Sir," his aide approached with a communication device, "we're receiving dozens of requests for private meetings. The Altarian Prime Minister wants to speak directly with President Santos. The Proxima Collective is offering major trade concessions if we'll reconsider." Jake glanced at the device but did not take it. Standard response to all requests. The United Earth Federation respects the Council's decision and expects the same respect in return. On Altaria Prime, the situation was becoming desperate. The planet's atmospheric processors installed by human engineers decades ago were showing signs of failure. Without proper maintenance, the carefully balanced atmosphere that supported billions of inhabitants would slowly return to its natural state, toxic gases that would kill most current residents. Prime Minister. Keltar stood in his office staring at reports from his science teams. Every attempt to repair the processors had failed. The human modifications to the original systems were beyond their understanding. "Contact Earth directly," he ordered his aide. "Bypass the Council completely. Offer them whatever they want." The response came within hours. President Maria Santos's message was brief and professional. The Council made their decision regarding humanity's role in galactic affairs. We respect that decision. Altaria's atmospheric systems are no longer our responsibility. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. The Andromedan mining operations that had powered their economy for decades began shutting down. Human-designed extraction equipment sat idle because no one else understood how to operate it. The Proxima trade routes, protected by human patrol ships for 30 years, became dangerous highways where pirates and raiders began to gather. Dr. Ben Harris, formerly the head of the Altarian Terraforming Project, watched the news reports from his new laboratory on Mars. He had been offered triple his old salary to return to Altaria, but he had not even bothered to respond. "The atmospheric crisis is getting worse," his assistant Dr. Amy Chen reported. "The Altarians are publicly blaming Earth for abandoning them." Ben shook his head as he returned to his work. His team was developing new terraforming techniques that would allow humans to transform worlds twice as fast as before. "They wanted us gone. Now they're gone from our concerns." The withdrawal was not just about equipment and facilities. Humans had served as mediators in dozens of disputes between different species. They had negotiated trade agreements, settled border conflicts, and prevented wars through careful diplomacy. With the humans gone, old tensions began to resurface. The Centauri Federation and the Rigel Alliance had maintained peace for 20 years thanks to human mediation. Within weeks of humanity's departure, border skirmishes broke out between their patrol ships. Neither side was willing to back down, and there was no neutral party to help them find a solution. Admiral Thompson received regular reports about the chaos spreading through former Council space. Her intelligence officers tracked the failing systems, the rising conflicts, and the growing panic among species that had taken human support for granted. "Should we offer assistance?" Commander Walsh asked during one of their briefings. "The humanitarian crisis is getting severe." Claire considered the question carefully. It was tempting to help. Humans had always been driven to assist others, to solve problems, to build better futures. But they had learned a hard lesson about the price of being indispensable. "No," she decided. "They made it clear that our help was not welcome. We will focus on our own people and our own future." The human colonies beyond the galactic rim were thriving. Free from Council restrictions, human scientists and explorers pushed into uncharted space. They discovered new star systems, made contact with species the Council had never encountered, and developed technologies that surpassed anything they had achieved while bound by galactic regulations. Captain Linda Brooks, leading humanity's first deep space exploration mission beyond the galaxy's edge, sent regular reports back to Earth. Her ships had made contact with 3 new species in the small Magellanic Cloud. These aliens were curious about humanity, welcoming them as equals rather than treating them as junior partners. "The technology here is incredible," Brooks reported. They have energy sources that make our fusion reactors look like campfires, and they're willing to share knowledge freely, as partners rather than masters. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council struggled to maintain basic functions. The automated defense systems protecting outer colonies began failing without human maintenance. Communication networks that had connected the galaxy for centuries started experiencing blackouts. Even simple things like space traffic control became chaotic without human operators who had managed the complex systems. First speaker. Mordain called emergency sessions almost daily, trying to address each new crisis as it arose. But the Council had built their civilization on a foundation of human expertise, and that foundation was crumbling. "We need to contact Earth again," urged the Altarian representative, whose own world was facing atmospheric collapse. Surely they can be convinced to return under better terms. Thexura, the Zalari ambassador who had led the campaign against humanity, sat silent in his seat. The reports from his own territory were grim. Without human patrol ships, the outer rim of Zalari space was being overrun by raiders. His people's arrogance had prevented them from learning human technologies, and now they paid the price for that pride. But Earth's response to all Council communications remained the same: respectful acknowledgement followed by polite disengagement. Humanity had moved on, and they had no intention of looking back. 6 months after humanity's departure, the first major crisis struck the Outer Rim territories. General Krixtar of the Andromedan Defense Forces stood in the Council's emergency session, his usually proud bearing replaced by barely controlled fear. The Outer Rim defense grid had gone completely dark. For 30 years, this massive network of automated defense platforms had protected 12 star systems from the savage fleets that roamed the galaxy's edge. The system was humanity's greatest military contribution to galactic security, a complex web of sensors, weapons, and communication relays that had kept the peace for 3 decades. "The grid has been offline for 3 weeks, Krixtar reported to the packed chamber. "We have lost all contact with the Kepler colony, and our long-range sensors detect at least 40 savage fleet ships massing at the border." The savage fleets were the nightmare that haunted civilized space. Nomadic raiders who lived on massive ships, they swept through undefended systems like locusts, stripping worlds of resources and enslaving populations. Only the constant vigilance of human patrol ships and the protection of the defense grid had kept them contained to the galaxy's wild edges. "Surely, our technicians can repair the system," offered Chancellor Velnash of the Proxima Collective, though his voice lacked confidence. Engineer Prime Zethal, supposedly the galaxy's leading expert on defense systems, shook his head with obvious frustration. "We have tried everything. The human modifications to the original design are beyond our understanding. They integrated technologies from 17 different species in ways that should be theoretically impossible." The truth was embarrassing and terrifying. The defense grid had started as a simple early warning network built by the Altarians 200 years ago. When humans joined the Council, they had volunteered to upgrade and maintain the system. Over 3 decades, they had transformed it into something far beyond its original design. Human engineers had studied every species' technology, learning their strengths and finding ways to combine them. Altarian sensors, Zalari power cores, Proxima communication arrays, Andromedan weapon systems, all woven together by human innovation into a unified defense network that was greater than the sum of its parts. Now, without the humans who understood how all the pieces fit together, the grid was just an expensive collection of incompatible hardware. "We need to evacuate the outer colonies," Krixtar continued. "Without the grid, they cannot defend themselves against a full savage fleet assault." The evacuation orders went out immediately, but it was already too late for some. The Kepler colony had been humanity's first joint settlement with the Andromedans, a thriving world with 2 million inhabitants. When the savage fleets reached it, there was no defense grid to stop them, no human patrol ships to intervene. The reports that came back were horrific. The savage fleets had overwhelmed the colony's limited defenses in hours. Most of the population had been taken as slaves, while the colony's infrastructure was stripped bare of anything valuable. On Altaria Prime, the atmospheric crisis had worsened dramatically. Without human maintenance, the terraforming equipment was slowly failing. The planet's atmosphere, carefully maintained for over a century, was beginning to revert to its natural state. Dr. Ben Harris, now working on Mars, received desperate communications from his former colleagues on Altaria. The latest message came from Dr. Yel Tara, who had worked under his supervision for 15 years. "Ben, please help us," the Altarian scientist pleaded through the communication device. "The atmospheric processors in the northern continent are failing completely. We have tried everything we know, but the human modifications are too complex. Billions of people will die if we cannot restore the systems." Ben looked at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. His assistant, Dr. Amy Chen, watched him work in silence for several minutes. "That was the 7th plea for help this week," Amy finally said. "I know." Ben continued his work on a new atmospheric processor design, one that would be purely human technology. They made their choice. They wanted us gone, so we're gone. The truth was that Ben's team had already moved far beyond the technology they had left behind on Altaria. Free from council restrictions on research and development, they had made breakthrough after breakthrough. The new atmospheric processors could transform a world's environment in decades instead of centuries. Similar advances were happening throughout human space. Without the burden of maintaining other species' infrastructure, human scientists and engineers could focus on their own projects. The results were remarkable. Captain Linda Brooks sent another report from her exploration mission beyond the Galactic Rim. Her ships had made contact with the Helix Confederation, a group of 3 highly advanced species in the small Magellanic Cloud. "The Helix species are fascinated by human adaptability," Brooks reported. "They have technology that makes council science look primitive, but they say they have never encountered a species as innovative as humans. They want to establish formal trade and research partnerships." The Helix Confederation possessed energy manipulation techniques that bordered on miraculous. They could create stable wormholes for instant travel between star systems, generate matter from pure energy, and even manipulate time on a small scale. Most importantly, they treated humanity as equals, not as junior partners or useful servants. They're offering to share their most advanced technologies, Brooks continued. In exchange, they want to study human problem-solving methods. They say our ability to combine different approaches in unexpected ways is unique in their experience. While humanity forged new alliances and made incredible discoveries, the former council territories continued to collapse. The Proxima Collective had split into 3 competing factions, unable to agree on how to handle the crisis. Without human mediators, old grudges and territorial disputes flared into open conflict. The Andromedan economy had crashed completely when their mining operations failed. The extraction equipment that had powered their civilization for decades sat idle. Human engineers had designed and maintained the complex systems, and without them, the Andromedans could not even extract basic metals from their own worlds. Most ironic was the fate of the Zalari hegemony. Ambassador Thexara, who had led the campaign to restrict humanity, now found himself leading desperate missions to abandoned human installations. His team searched through empty research stations and mining facilities, hoping to reverse engineer the technologies they had foolishly cast aside. "We must learn how their systems work," Thexara insisted to his science teams. "Surely we can understand what humans created." But human technology was not just about individual devices or systems. It was about the integrated approach, the way humans saw connections between different fields of knowledge. They did not just build better weapons. They built weapons that could be quickly reconfigured for different threats. They did not just create faster ships. They designed ships that could be easily repaired with materials from any industrialized world. The savage fleets, sensing weakness throughout the former council territories, began launching coordinated attacks. Without the defense grid, without human patrol ships, and without the unity that human diplomacy had maintained, the civilized worlds were easy targets. The Rigel Alliance lost 3 colony worlds in a single week. The Centauri Federation's capital system came under direct attack for the first time in 2 centuries. Even the core worlds of the Council began installing emergency defenses as the savage fleets grew bolder. First Speaker Mordain called another emergency session, the 15th since humanity's departure. The chamber was half empty now, as many species were too busy dealing with their own crises to attend council meetings. "We must face the truth," Mordain said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Our civilization is collapsing. Without humanity's knowledge and skills, we cannot maintain the systems that our society depends upon. The few representatives still in attendance sat in grim silence. They had all received the same reports, seen the same evidence of decline. The galaxy that had thrived for 3,000 years was falling apart in less than a year. Perhaps, suggested the Altarian representative, we could offer humanity full membership restoration with expanded rights and territories. Thexara, his pride finally broken by months of failure, nodded in agreement. We were wrong to fear human expansion. Now we see that their growth was the foundation of our prosperity. But when the formal offer was transmitted to Earth, President Santos's response was swift and final. Humanity has found new partners and new frontiers beyond the galactic rim. We are no longer interested in returning to an organization that sought to limit our potential. We wish the Council well in their future endeavors. The message was polite, respectful, and absolutely crushing. Humanity had not just left the Council, they had moved beyond it entirely, finding opportunities and allies that the Council species had never even imagined existed. As the emergency session ended, the remaining representatives sat in stunned silence. They had thought they were containing a dangerous rival. Instead, they had driven away the only thing holding their civilization together. 2 years after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council existed in name only. First speaker. Mordain sat alone in his office on the Council homeworld, reading reports that painted a picture of complete civilizational collapse. The savage fleets had overrun 17 star systems in the past month alone. The outer rim defense grid remained completely non-functional, despite countless attempts at repair. 3 major trade routes had collapsed entirely when the space lanes became too dangerous to travel without human escort ships. Mordain's personal communication device chimed with another emergency message. This one came from his own homeworld of Altaria Prime, where the atmospheric crisis had reached a catastrophic level. First speaker, the message began. The southern continent's atmospheric processors have failed completely. We are beginning emergency evacuations, but we estimate 12 million casualties before the process is complete. The toxic gases are spreading faster than our models predicted. Mordain closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. Altaria Prime had been one of the galaxy's most beautiful worlds, a garden planet that served as the diplomatic heart of the Council. Now it was slowly becoming uninhabitable, its carefully maintained atmosphere reverting to the poisonous mixture that had existed before human terraforming technology transformed it. The irony was not lost on him. The Altarians had been among the first to support Resolution 847, fearing that human expansion threatened their comfortable way of life. Now their world was dying because they had driven away the only people who understood how to keep it alive. A soft knock at his door interrupted his dark thoughts. His aide, a young Altarian named Feltar, entered with another stack of urgent communications. Sir, we've received formal requests for emergency assistance from 47 different worlds. The Proxima Collective is offering to transfer ownership of 3 star systems to Earth in exchange for technical support. The Andromedan Defense Force is requesting immediate military aid against savage fleet incursions. And Earth's response? The same as always, sir. Polite acknowledgement followed by a statement that these matters are no longer their concern. Mordain nodded wearily. He had sent dozens of personal messages to President Santos over the past 2 years, each more desperate than the last. The responses were always courteous but firm. Humanity had moved on. On Earth, President Maria Santos stood in the Situation Room, reviewing the latest reports from human deep space missions. The contrast with the Council territories was stark and telling. Our colonies in the Helix Confederation space are exceeding all projections, reported Dr. Helen Foster, who now served as Earth's Minister of Advanced Research. The new energy technologies we've learned have increased our manufacturing capacity by 300%. Captain Linda Brooks, recently returned from another exploration mission, added her own report. We've made contact with 2 more species beyond the galactic rim. The Spiral Collective wants to establish a joint research station to study human innovation techniques. They're offering to share their dimensional manipulation technology in exchange. Santos smiled as she reviewed the data. Free from Council restrictions, humanity had exploded into rapid expansion and technological development. They had established colonies in 6 different galaxy clusters, made contact with dozens of new species, and developed technologies that made their old Council-era equipment look like primitive tools. What about the situation in former Council space? Santos asked her intelligence director, Admiral Claire Thompson. Thompson's expression grew somber. The collapse is accelerating. The Zalari hegemony has lost half its territory to savage fleet raids. The Proxima Collective's civil war has spread to 14 star systems. Even the core worlds are reporting infrastructure failures. Any direct requests for assistance? Hundreds. Everything from emergency humanitarian aid to full military intervention. The most recent came from First Speaker Mordain himself, offering to dissolve the Council entirely if humanity will return to provide leadership. Santos considered this for a moment. Part of her felt sympathy for the suffering in former Council space. But humanity had learned a hard lesson about the price of being indispensable to ungrateful partners. Standard response, she decided. We respect the Council's original decision and expect them to respect ours. The truth was that humanity had not just recovered from their expulsion, they had thrived beyond their wildest dreams. The Helix Confederation had introduced them to technologies and concepts that revolutionized every aspect of human civilization. Dr. Ben Harris, now leading Earth's Atmospheric Engineering Division, demonstrated the latest terraforming techniques to a group of visiting human colonists. The new systems could transform a dead world into a garden planet in just 15 years, a fraction of the time required by the old Council-era methods. The key breakthrough came from Helix energy manipulation techniques, Harris explained, as he showed holographic models of the new processors. We can now directly alter atmospheric composition at the molecular level, rather than relying on slow biological processes. One of the colonists raised her hand. Dr. Harris, we're receiving requests from former Council worlds asking for technical assistance. The Altarians are offering massive resource payments for help with their atmospheric crisis. Harris shook his head. Our technology is for human colonies only. The Council species made it clear that they didn't want our involvement in galactic affairs. We're simply respecting their wishes. Meanwhile, in the ruins of what had once been the galaxy's greatest civilization, the final collapse was beginning. The savage fleets, no longer contained by human defenses, had grown bold enough to attack the core worlds directly. General Krixtar stood in the command center of the Andromedan Defense Force, watching as long-range sensors tracked massive enemy formations approaching their capital system. His fleet was outnumbered 10-1, and without human-designed weapons and tactics, they had no hope of victory. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving surrender offers from the savage fleet commanders. They're demanding tribute payments and territorial concessions. Krixtar stared at the sensor displays, remembering when human patrol ships had kept the savage fleet so far from civilized space that most people forgot they existed. Now those same raiders were dictating terms to the former masters of the galaxy. Send a message to all Andromedan worlds, he ordered. Prepare for enemy occupation. We no longer have the strength to defend ourselves. The Proxima Collective had already fractured completely, its 3 factions now engaged in open warfare. The Centauri Federation had abandoned half its territory, withdrawing to fortified core systems that they could still defend. Even the proud Zalari hegemony was negotiating surrender terms with savage fleet warlords. Ambassador Thexara, the architect of Resolution 847, sat in his private chambers on the Zalari homeworld, composing what he knew would be his final message to Earth. His hands shook as he worked. Whether from age, illness, or shame, he could not tell. President Santos, his message began, I am the one primarily responsible for humanity's expulsion from the Council. I convinced my colleagues that human expansion threatened our stability. I was wrong, and I accept full responsibility for the catastrophe that has followed. He paused, struggling to find words for what he needed to say next. Our civilization is ending. The savage fleets will overrun the core worlds within months. Billions will die or be enslaved because of my prideful stupidity. I do not ask for forgiveness because I know I do not deserve it. I ask only that you remember us as we were in better days, not as the fools who threw away the greatest partnership in galactic history. The message was transmitted to Earth, but like all the others, it received only a brief, polite acknowledgement. Humanity had moved beyond the need for apologies from the species that had betrayed them. Captain Jake Peterson, now commanding Earth's Deep Space Defense Force, reviewed intelligence reports from the former Council territories. His ships patrolled the edges of human space, ensuring that the chaos engulfing the galaxy did not spread to threaten human colonies. The Kepler system has gone completely dark, reported his intelligence officer, Commander Alex Carter. We believe the savage fleets have established a permanent base there. Peterson nodded grimly. Kepler had been humanity's first joint colony with another species, a symbol of cooperation and shared prosperity. Now it was a raider stronghold, its population either dead or enslaved. Any signs of savage fleet movement toward human space? Negative, sir. They seem to be avoiding our territory entirely. Intelligence suggests they remember human military capabilities and prefer easier targets. That was the final irony. The savage fleets that were overwhelming the former Council territories still feared to attack human space. They remembered 30 years of defeats at human hands and had no desire to face human military might again. But humanity had no obligation to protect the species that had expelled them. The Council had made its choice, and now it would face the consequences alone. As reports continued to arrive from the collapsing galaxy, one thing became increasingly clear. The golden age of galactic civilization was over. The careful balance that had maintained peace for 3,000. 5 years had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, and the transformation was complete. Admiral Claire Thompson stood on the bridge of her flagship, the New Horizon, watching as her fleet conducted training exercises in the Helix Confederation space. The New Horizon was a marvel of human and Helix engineering combined. Twice the size of anything the old Council had ever built, it incorporated dimensional manipulation technology that allowed it to exist partially outside normal space. Its weapons could strike targets across multiple star systems simultaneously, and its shields were powered by energy drawn directly from nearby stars. "Admiral," reported her communications officer, "Commander Alex Carter, we're receiving another formal request from the remnants of the Council. They're asking for permission to send a diplomatic mission to Earth." Thompson did not even look up from her tactical displays. Standard response: denied. "Yes, ma'am." The truth was that there was barely a Council left to send diplomatic missions. The savage fleets had completed their conquest of the outer territories and were now pressing toward the core worlds. Of the original 9 and 26 member species, fewer than 200 still maintained independent governments. The Altarian homeworld had been evacuated completely after its atmosphere became unbreathable. The survivors had scattered to refugee camps on other worlds, dependent on charity from species that were themselves struggling to survive. First Speaker Mordain had died in the evacuation, his body finally giving out under the stress of watching his civilization crumble. The Andromedan Defense Force had surrendered after a final battle that lasted less than 6 hours. Without human-designed weapons and tactics, their proud military had been swept aside by savage fleet raiders. General Krikstar now served as a slave administrator in the occupation government, organizing tribute payments to his former enemies. The Proxima Collective no longer existed as a unified entity. Its 3 factions had fought themselves into exhaustion before the savage fleets arrived to claim the ruins. The Centauri Federation had retreated to just 4 heavily fortified star systems, abandoning the rest of their territory to raiders and refugees. Most ironic was the fate of the Zalari hegemony. Ambassador Thexara had died 2 years earlier, reportedly taking his own life rather than witness the complete destruction of everything he had worked to build. The Zalari homeworld was now the capital of the largest savage fleet confederation, its ancient cities serving as bases for the very raiders the species had once considered beneath their notice. Dr. Helen Foster, now Earth's Minister of Galactic Affairs, reviewed the latest intelligence reports from her office on Luna Station. The orbital facility was itself a testament to human advancement, incorporating helix technology to exist in 12 dimensions simultaneously while appearing as a simple space station to normal observation. "The collapse is essentially complete," she reported to President Santos during their weekly briefing. "We estimate less than 5% of the original Council territories remain under civilized control. The rest have either fallen to savage fleets or descended into chaos." Santos nodded as she reviewed the data. "Any signs that the situation might stabilize?" "None whatsoever. Without human mediation, the remaining species cannot coordinate their defenses. Without human technology, They cannot maintain their infrastructure. Without human economic management, their trade networks have completely collapsed. The reports painted a picture of civilizational regression on a galactic scale. Worlds that had enjoyed advanced technology for centuries were reverting to pre-industrial conditions as their complex systems failed. Species that had traveled between stars for millennia were becoming trapped on their homeworlds as their spaceships broke down and could not be repaired. Meanwhile, humanity had never been more prosperous. Dr. Ben Harris stood in his new laboratory on Kepler 442b, one of humanity's newest colonies in the spiral collective space. The world had been terraformed in just 8 years using advanced atmospheric engineering techniques that combined human innovation with alien technology. "We're ready to begin the next phase of expansion," Harris reported to Earth's Colonial Development Board. "Our new terraforming systems can transform 12 worlds simultaneously. We could establish 50 new colonies within the next decade." The scale of human expansion was breathtaking. Free from council restrictions, human ships had spread throughout 3 different galaxy clusters. They had established colonies on over 200 worlds, made contact with 47 different species, and developed technologies that bordered on the miraculous Captain Linda Brooks, now commanding humanity's First Contact Division, had recently returned from the Andromeda galaxy with reports of even more advanced civilizations. Eager to establish relationships with humanity, the Void Shapers have technology that makes the Helix Confederation look primitive, she reported during her debriefing. They can create matter directly from quantum fluctuations and manipulate the fundamental forces of physics. They want to establish a research partnership because they're fascinated by human problem-solving abilities. Brooks paused before continuing with the most remarkable part of her report. They also warned us about something they call the Great Filter, a phenomenon that destroys most civilizations when they reach a certain level of technological development. According to them, humanity is the first species they've encountered that shows signs of being able to survive it. The contrast between humanity's rapid advancement and the former Council's collapse could not have been more stark. While the galaxy fell into darkness and barbarism, humanity was reaching heights of achievement that previous generations could never have imagined. On Earth itself, President Santos prepared for what would likely be her final State of the Union address before retiring from politics. She stood in the rebuilt United Nations building in Geneva, looking out at representatives from human colonies throughout multiple galaxies. 5 years ago, she began, the Galactic Council told us we were too dangerous to be allowed freedom. They said our expansion threatened their stability. They voted to restrict our growth and place our development under their oversight. The audience listened in respectful silence, though most of them had lived through those events themselves. We could have fought that decision. We could have argued, pleaded, or threatened. Instead, we chose to walk away with dignity. We chose to respect their decision and find our own path among the stars. Santos activated a holographic display that showed the current extent of human space. The 3-dimensional map revealed colonies spread across multiple galaxy clusters, trade routes connecting dozens of different species, and exploration missions pushing ever further into the unknown. Today, humanity has achieved more in 5 years of freedom than we accomplished in 30 years as council members. We have formed partnerships based on mutual respect rather than dependence. We have developed technologies that would have been impossible under council restrictions. We have proven that sometimes the strongest response to rejection is simply to succeed beyond your critics' wildest dreams. The applause was thunderous and sustained. Santos waited for it to die down before continuing. But our success comes with responsibility. Long-range sensors have detected massive savage fleet formations massing at the edge of former council space. Our intelligence estimates suggest they are preparing for a final assault on the remaining civilized worlds. A murmur ran through the audience. Everyone knew about the council's collapse, but the prospect of a final savage fleet offensive was sobering news. We have received hundreds of requests for military assistance from former council species. They offer us territory, resources, even complete submission in exchange for protection from the savage fleets. Santos paused, letting the weight of the moment settle over the audience. I am announcing today that humanity will establish a defensive perimeter around our own space. We will protect our colonies, our allies, and our trade routes, but we will not intervene in the conflicts that consume former council territory. That galaxy chose to reject our partnership 5 years ago. We respect that choice, and we expect them to face the consequences of their decisions. The announcement was broadcast throughout human space and beyond. Within hours, it had reached the surviving Council worlds, where it was received with despair by some and resignation by others. The Zalari survivors, now living in refugee camps in the few remaining safe systems, listened to Santos's speech with bitter understanding. They had rejected humanity's partnership and protection. Now they would face the savage fleets alone, just as they had demanded. The Altarian refugees wept as they realized their long hope of human rescue was finally dead. For 5 years, they had believed that humanity would eventually return to help them rebuild their civilization. Now they knew the truth. Humanity had moved beyond them entirely. Admiral Thompson received orders to implement the new defensive strategy within 24 hours. Her fleets took up positions along the borders of human space, creating an impenetrable barrier that would protect humanity's new allies while leaving former Council territory to its fate. As the massive human fleet settled into defensive positions, long-range sensors detected the approach of the largest savage fleet in galactic history. Over 3,000 warships were converging on the Council's